Right, doing a quick screen capture here. I'm watching an episode of James Burt's Connections. This is episode 15, series 2, and this is the segment on the Irish Potato Famine. In terms of popular media coverage of that event in history, it has some of the information, by no means all of it. Another interesting parallel, drawn from history, which involves the Scottish land clearances, also involve the, this is going back further than that again now, the conquering of Wales. I'm sure we'll find parallels as well of the Anglo-French wars, but just taking the potato famine and the land clearances and some reading, of which I plan to do more, but the idea of the primitive accumulation of land and things like the game laws at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So I'm just going to let this segment run now and then sort of take up the rest of my sort of personal narrative based on where I'm kind of up to with my thinking of where we are today and how things are happening and why.
It was an American fungus, and in 1845 it arrived in the potato crop, leaving the Irish nothing to eat. Not almost nothing, nothing. There were too many corpses that winter to bury. When the sheer scale of the human tragedy and devastation finally dawned on the British, they changed their very restrictive import laws so as to let American ships bring in extra corn to feed the Irish. But the gesture was too little and too late. The American corn shipments convinced British industrialists that all anti-import laws should be abolished, and they used the latest means available to get that free trade message out to rally all their supporters. It was a simple enough message, because free trade would mean cheaper imports like American corn, and that would mean cheaper bread, and that would mean lower wages, and jobs, and economic expansion, and more money all round. But the major political row created by the potato famine that let the American clippers bring their corn to Britain strengthened the hand of the free trade lobby in Parliament. Although they'd never have got the bill through the House if it hadn't been for some crooked politicians and some rather frank behaviour. Thanks to which the free trade lobby would be able to spread the word. The frank behaviour involved a number of definitely strange brown paper parcels. Among other things, a dog, a bed, and a housemaid. All sent through the mail free. This was a kind of weird shenanigans a reformer called Rowland Hill exposed in 1836 when he started looking into the murky workings of the British Post Office. It was all to do with fraudulent franking. See, members of Parliament had free franking privileges, and they were using them to mail this kind of stuff to their pals all over the country, losing the government millions in revenue. Not to mention the time wasted by postmen collecting money because you paid to receive a letter, not to send one. And in any case, you couldn't read half of them because you paid by the page, so people wrote up, down, and sideways. What we need, said Hill to the people here in Parliament, is post boxes and a standard postage rate payable in advance with a stamp on an envelope. In 1839, Parliament agreed to this stamp, the penny black. And if you ever see one, grab it because it's worth a fortune today. And once again, thanks to America. That's who did the penny black. A printer from Massachusetts. His main aim in life had been just to make good.
Right, okay. James Burke is a hell of a lot more interested than I am. Just a note on that. There's a website called KWeb, and there's also a great YouTube site, and you can watch all of these episodes on the site. You can buy the DVDs. There are links to all of that thing. But KWeb is a knowledge education project which James Burke is doing to make all of these programs searchable, and it seems to me a shame that the thing isn't live. I heard an interview on the radio, on a web-based radio station, talking about it. I eagerly clicked on a few things, expecting to see the whole project up and running, but there's various programming expertise needed to get the get the thing to market. It's quite an ambitious project, but anyway, just on that segment that we just seen there, there are some awkward parallels there. To do with what I would call the paradox of free markets. Is it a paradox, or is it an irony? What I mean is that international global markets are not free markets, and I believe, things like insider trading, the sort of thing that James was just talking about there, about MPs abusing a privilege in terms of franking letters. The story of the Potato Famine in Ireland is a story of driving people off the land. It's a story of driving people into factories on foreign shores. It's a story of breaking the bond of self-sufficiency. That may sound like a contradiction in terms when you say, well, the potatoes fell to these fungi and therefore the nation starved because of that, and it was a great natural disaster, but their own their own fault for not being diversified enough. The story goes wider than that, in that what people are allowed to grow, what people are asked to grow, the regulation of government that guides or dictates what we are or aren't allowed to do. One product which has a particularly strong correlation with regulation, which appears to make no sense whatsoever, is actually the industrial hemp thing. Now, hemp is from the cannabis genus of plant, and of course, immediately we think, well, war on drugs, pothead smoking pope and speaking New Age spiritual stuff. Hemp is a building material. Hemp is a source of food. It's a source of oil for burning, fibres for making paper. It's an amazing plant that's been cultivated by humans for over 10,000 years. There is a lot of very interesting, powerful information about it, and regulation of the hemp plant in various states in the US. I'm not that familiar with the regulation in the UK, but it's forgotten history, or to put it this way, it's history we're not encouraged to remember, and some of it is history that becomes mythology, and that's an important point in the idea of free markets, and that there's something natural which, if we study terribly hard, we can actually predict, because economics is a precise science. Economics is a justification argument motivated by a desire to accumulate capital in the form of money as a store of value. So economics is the church of the free money, or the free market rather. Money is the bread of absolution. Money is another mythology in its current form, by which, and here what I'm doing is I'm merely parroting a whole body of literature and philosophical thought and political thought, economic thought. And I'm an absolute novice at this. I've been reading, albeit solidly, for about a month on this, and I did study A-level economics, and did some economics units in my degree. In fact, my degree laughingly is called land economy in some universities. Where I did it was called urban estate management. The irony of that is, having read urban estate management, you kind of get an impression of really quite how plastic some of this these academic frills and medals actually are. That's not to denigrate the hard, serious work that's done in universities by all the research graduates and even sort of undergraduates that are trying to get an education and progress learning and knowledge and scholarship. But there's again a sponsored motive to a lot of that, which is dishonest academically and dishonest intellectually, and amounts to no more than so much snake oil salesmanship. The quality of debate in public forums at elections is disappointingly low. The scholarship and intellectual honesty in those debates is deplorable. and the factionalisation in scholarship as well, in the scrabble for funding, again from a corporate sector that is looking for soothsayers to their own myth, and a very powerful realisation for me of my own history as a Welshman. Recently was to visit the story of the 500 bards in Wales that were burnt at the stake for not singing the praises on Edward I's victory procession around Wales, and a poem and talk by Do, who's an Irish bard, on YouTube, just woke that up at the back of my mind. I've a friend that is actually a Welsh language publisher and has published many books on Welsh medieval history. Hi Ashley, and over dinners and chats, and when we were lads or whatever, talking about some of this stuff. Again, I don't, when we're young, or when, well, really all stages of our life, sometimes it's just so hard, when you're under the yoke, to think about these things, to have the luxury. I mean, most of us haven't got the time, space, and energy to enjoy our families and spend time with our children and with our brothers and sisters, our siblings, and with our friends. And the modern society is like a bear baiting cage, a cockfighting pit, a dog fighting arena. We're being controlled to fight each other, and see each other in factions as enemies, when the only enemy in all of us is the greed in our hearts that's crowding out the love in our hearts. And I'm not saying that in a precious way. The tendency to take statements or chinks of mistakes in someone's point of view, and then use that to devalue areas of their point of view which may be not consistent with your own point of view, is there for all us to see. Politicians that don't ask questions, company spokesmen that change the subject, so on and so forth. And elevating ideas or concepts, which are beliefs at the end of the day, to almost religious truths. And this is and these are conclusions that I've come to, based on my own experiences of the last few years. What started me off down this road sort of ended up with this diagram I've got flashing away here. I'll explain that a bit more in a minute. But what started me off down on this road was back in the early 2000s. I was a successful property developer in London, and I built a company with a capital value of several tens of millions of pounds. And I got out of that company with a net worth, which means basically my ex-wife and I had we had £5.5 million sterling in cash in the bank, and we had clear of debt. Other assets probably adding up to something like £1 million, maybe £2 million. Whatever it was, it's irrelevant up to a point. But I did well in the system, and I have no complaints that all went very swimmingly. And quite honestly, I sit here today still feeling very content, very happy. Even though subsequent to that high point, if you like, things have gone sort of slightly off track. If I was judging things by the old narrative, I think I'd be absolutely distraught by now. But I'm not. I'm actually really happy. I'm still really good friends with my ex-wife. My ex-wife has had the way we did the divorce is I kept my trophy country estate and mansion, which was going to be part of the bubble I wanted to build for myself to, really honour myself, worship myself, elevate myself. And that's what it was. And my ex-wife, who has to be said is much smarter than me, and whilst we both went for this sort of trophy idea together, it was definitely me, not my ex-wife, who wanted something more sustainable, more and my ego wasn't ready to retire or whatever, even though subsequently that's what I did. Anyway, because we divorced, I needed to borrow money to finish this estate off, and which meant that I merrily did what I'd always done, which was borrowed money to do it, which I had to do because obviously we've been getting divorced. My wife and I split everything down the middle, including the cash in the Isle of Man and all these other bits and pieces, which were all tax declared, tax paid, even though for the next 10 years there's still tax investigations or whatever. And by the time I retired, I was 39, which is very young to retire, I know. By the time I retired, I was completely burnt out. I'd had a 2 or 3 year high court battle with previous business partners who sued me for £12 million. A lot of really unpleasant stuff. There's me thinking we'd all done rather well, and yet we were fighting each other again. This kind of destructive thing, which I really didn't understand. I fought the fight, but I did that because that's what I thought that's what you did. And then when we won the fight, I realised, well, no one's won this fight. We won the fight in the court. That's my ex-wife and I. In fact, we had 2 of them. And the legal bill on both sides came to well over £1 million, arguing over commas, full stops, and basically one side feeling they should have more than they had originally agreed to and things. Human greed, and that, as I say, is how we are divided and ultimately conquered. And this diagram here, it sums up so many things. On the left, what you have is radioactive decay, and it's showing a smaller number of atoms over a period of time, over a half-life. On the right-hand side, there are more atoms of the same stuff, but there are more of them, again decaying over the same time. So the idea of the half-life is that the radioactive matter, whatever they are, decay. It's completely uncertain, one, whether they will decay at all. There's no reason why they should, but they're unstable, so they might. By observation, over their half-life, at the end of that period, known as the half-life, whether it's anything from seconds to millions of years, over the half-life, half of them will decay and half of them won't. If you're a physicist, forgive me, what's important about this is that it's not predictable, but it's kind of science. It's kind of a natural science, which, because there are equations about this, algorithms, what people seek to do is predict the in-between points of something completely random, because of something called probability, which means that if there are more of them, they're more likely to cluster into groups that are predictable. Well, this is exactly the same computer model doing that. On the left, you've got the less of them, so they look more random, than to the right, where you have the more of them. But this is all exactly the same, starting and finishing at different times, and you can see how chaotic that is. It starts with a full bottle of stuff. It ends with an empty bottle of stuff. But what happens in between those 2 points is completely unpredictable, and you get uncertainty theory, etc. And the reason I did a video of this, sort of saying it's performance art, is that it's completely random. I thought I'll drag them into a document, and I did that, and then it dragged some writing as well. And this starts off with writing and ends up at this. I mean, it's I think it's some sort of computer virus, possibly. There's certainly some sort of feedback loop going on in there. But what's important is that I'm telling you that that's what that represents, and I am being truthful about that. That really is what Wikipedia says that represents, and there's a link to the Wikipedia article up here, which is halflifesim.gif. There's a link on my blog where you can go there, and it explains how the basic physics of what half-lives are, and that's what that is. Now, if I was David Cameron and I was sat here in my suit, and I was coming to you to explain to you, well, gross domestic product is really important, and it's really important, and here's, my scientists at all the great universities have represented this for me. Do you see what's happening here? And therefore, gross domestic product tells us that we need to invest in this way or invest in that way. Well, this is the point about probability theory. You have to make assumptions and predictions, and those assumptions and predictions are subject to motivations and justifications and opinions. So if you hear someone say, well, my algorithm or my model is predicting or suggesting this, they're not impartial. They're not disinterested in what their models are showing. So if anyone says to you, well, oh, my algorithms and my scientists and this, they're telling me this, they have probability, and where you have probability, you have to make value judgments. And those value judgments are driven by the client. And what I'm saying is the client in our modern society is global big business, the corporations. Nothing more complicated than that. Where it gets tricky for me is I happen to believe in sustainability, and I happen to love the environment, and I think it's a lovely world, and all the people in it are, as far as I'm concerned, children of nature, and none of us have a greater right or a lesser right to be here. None of us have a greater or lesser right to justice, to a greater or lesser right to what we call human rights. I believe that, because I believe in equality. I believe in racial equality, sexual equality. I absolutely do. And it's not something that I believe out of religious conviction. It's not something I believe. It's part of my sort of own belief system, but it's not an external thing. It's what's inside me. It's what's in my heart. I've been terribly jealous with about lovers and things in the past, and obviously I've been ambitious and I've got right down there, rolled up my sleeves and had a good old scrap to to primitively sort of accumulate. I look at that back now really rather red-faced because ultimately it's a con, and it's a con on two levels. You can't take it with you, and one certainty of this life, as with this diagram, is we are going to die. Sorry, it's I don't want to die, but but I know I'm going to. The certainty is you live, you die, and you pay taxes. Death and taxes, Mark Twain. There's lots of tongue-in-cheek stuff. There's lots of sort of popular wisdom. And when you start sort of thinking about this and realising that it's not that we're being controlled, it's not that someone's in control. Everybody is sort of either scared shitless or just saying, well, fair enough, that's what it is. I mean, another one I blogs, there's a poem called Desiderata. There's a poem called If. There's a poem I put up there which I came across the other day, which a chap called Alan Watts had in an essay that I read of his, and there's lots of great YouTube videos of this chap Watts. Noam Chomsky, who Ali G interviewed. There's an interview, on YouTube. There are lots of great thinkers that knew all this stuff. Jung, Freud. Most of us have heard of. This is the other thing about academics and scholars and the corporate ones, if you like the branded ones, and the independent ones. Is that they form schools of thought, and it always used to sort of annoy me that they didn't get more annoyed about things. And someone told me a joke about why do academics have such big rows with each other sometimes, and it's because they have nothing to argue about, and you can take that any way you like, but I mean, there's nothing to argue about, only arguments, because everything is random, but it's not random, and that doesn't make sense. But what makes sense is what we're conditioned to believe, what we're taught at school, what our parents are taught at school, and what our parents tell us. And so the question is, I was brought up to mistrust people from Southern Ireland because the Southern Irish were neutral in the Second World War and allowed German U-boats access to their ports. And having been brought up in an army environment, I went to an army school in West Germany. This was back in the 70s. I mean, obviously, my schooling there, primary school, military primary school, and then again the first year of my A-levels I did in a military school in West Germany. Clearly, what we're a product of our environment. The nature and nurture arguments. Well, the environmental arguments, and the thing that sort of really woke me up to this stuff was starting to look at sustainability and sustainable lifestyles, which is something I started to do with my country estate. I met this lovely woman, fell in love, we started a family, and Johanna's Swedish, and we now live in Sweden. And having been here for a year, Sweden and the Swedes have a completely different attitude to the countryside and what have you. And I started to think about this, because when I first came to Sweden, I was really, really suspicious. One, I was offended because the Swedes are actually quite forthright about how good they think they are, and there's a lot of people who happen to agree with them, so they get reinforced with that. But I really used to get quite angry about it, that's a conditioner thing. There you go. That's a nurture thing. It's my environment and my sort of tribal allegiances, if you like, to first this place called Wales. You can take the boy out of Wales, but you can't take Wales out of the boy. That's what it says on the back of this T-shirt. Well, there are people who understand this stuff and then use it to their benefit. And some of them at a less ambitious level say, you have to be careful what you say, because my examples of less ambitious level would be, say, like, what's he called, David Koresh, the Waco, Texas branch Davidian cult. I mean, I haven't looked that up recently. I'm just remembering this from watching the news when that was all happening. The Branch Davidians, that guy, they were a cult and all this sort of thing. But he would have used these belief systems to control that group. The Jamestown massacre, that's another one. And we're taught to be really mistrusting of cults. Well, the biggest cult at the moment, I think, is the global free market corporate cult. And I say it's a cult, and it's every much as big a cult as some of the famous cult of personalities that have happened. An acceptable one to talk about from recent times is Pol Pot in Cambodia, personality cult. You've got, there was Papa Doc in Haiti, if you're American. There's North Korea, Chairman Mao, Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Nicolae Ceausescu. Oh dear, the one in East Germany now, Honecker. Anyway, I mean, it's interesting to sort of sit down and see how many. You think of lots more, I'm sure. the Moonies. Some people say Hare Krishna, but we know these things exist and these phenomena exist, and there's something called cult deprogramming and stuff. I really do believe that there's a cult of global corporatism, and quite a lot of our governments happen to be members of it, and they're kind of factional as well. What's the difference between Ed Miliband, the Clegg man, and David Cameron? Personally, I think they're all in the same cult. They're all in the corporate boat. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm not on the corporate boat, because I've worked for big corporations. I've worked for Shell UK. I've worked for the Prudential. I've worked for a company that was called London Shop PLC, that was a very big property company. We got taken over by another company called Peel Holdings. So I've worked in them, and I've also worked and had my own companies. The difference between entrepreneurs and corporations is really just a question of an attitude to competition. Small to medium enterprises, the SMEs, as the economists call them, they are more democratic because they don't gather together sufficient power to be able to force the agenda of regulation. So they are regulated and have to compete within those regulations. Really, it's one rule for the competitive and another rule above that for the not so competitive. At an economic concept, it's a two-stage market, and therefore what actually has happened is monopolistic behaviour has been institutionalised. And as a businessman that has competed and albeit in a fixed match, because at the end of the day what happens is you've got a football pitch and everybody's busy kicking the ball in the back of the net, and then they throw another ball in, and then at the end of the game you see who's got the most balls in their net or whatever, and a percentage of those balls are allowed to be stayed out there. There's a great big recession, and the banks and the government will take most of their balls back, even the ones that haven't had to be paid back to them because the money's been borrowed in the first place. But what they do is they take all the balls back, and then decide who are the next, are going to be the next team. That analogy could develop that one all day long. A really good one to do would be to do the Premier League football. If you want to know why Roman Abramovich would pay £30 million for whatever player recently, or Manchester City, it's big business, and it's about debt, and it's about creating money. It's also about creating a belief that someday I can play for Man United. I used to be a rugby player, and it was amateur in my day, and you did it because it was fun to compete, and it's fun to compete now, I'm sure. And the players out there, I met a few, rugby players. So I'm not denigrating rugby players at all. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the football thing is really helpful to the whole idea of a global market and the global market of players. And here we go, here's the rub. How well is the national football team doing? We've got a global market in players. We've got the best football league in the whole of the world. I'm sure the Spanish beg to differ, and the Italians. But we are told we've got the best league in the world. But where do we come in the World Cup? How does England do, in its own national sport? Not very well. Well, there's an example of an ecology of globalism, okay, where the global game and the World Cup is big, it's huge business and serves many symbolic functions, but the local ecology, the local game suffers. How many local sports administrators have you spoken to have said to you, well, look, let's have let's have more multi-million-pound football players and more of this stuff, and let's sell all our local football pitches away, because once the grassroots go away, it doesn't support itself. Globally it might, but it's killing football in the UK. And what is doing that? It's branded global corporatism. No more, no less. And I would put forward that argument, and it would be an interesting thing to sort of have to put the tools to work to analyse that. Just in terms of the screen capture to wrap up, because I don't want to go on too long. I don't know how long I've gone already, but that's what this diagram's about. I mean, if you read my blog, all this stuff is in there. Some of the stuff I've said just now isn't. It's just stuff that occurred to me. So I'm developing conceptual models to demonstrate some of the wider ideas, like the football analogy, for instance. I just made that one up. I mean, and some of the others as well. But if anybody tells you that the Irish potato famine was anything other than a complete abdication of human duty of the Victorian government at the time to do something about it, and that it only occurred to them too late that they could do something about it, that's complete rubbish. It was done deliberately to create fear and to create cheap labour and to deny the means of self-sufficiency to the larger population of Ireland. And there you have the root of the trouble, and I understand that now. And it makes me feel really angry. And I think the point about it, though, I kind of like to take away from it isn't that sort of, well, it's a bit like I didn't really understand the concept of Liverpool City Council apologising for slavery. I was living in Bristol at the time, and of course Bristol has the same history as Liverpool in that respect. And in the same way, I lived in West Germany for many years, and I didn't understand the concept of the modern generation of Germans apologising for the Holocaust. I believe that they should be kept aware of it, but I do question why we aren't aware of our role in slavery, our role in starving people to death in Ireland for an economic principle. Well, not a principle, but an economic belief, prerogative, whatever. That's just, to me, that's just plain wrong. Well, it's dishonest, and on just about every level you can think about. So my own take on it, and I only started reading into all of this, and I've kind of been switched on to it from my own selfish views. I think, well, I've been having a local difficulty with banks, and I haven't done anything wrong, and I don't understand how they're making decisions there, because the decisions they're making don't make sense. And of course, then they made sense all of a sudden when I realised that the banks create money from nothing, and it's free money for them. whereas it's money I've earned. So I value money I've earned. That's another argument altogether, whether I earned it or not, because I would argue that I did, because because I'm an entrepreneur and I still have an entrepreneurial ideal, and do believe I believe in industry, and I believe in society, and I believe in people trying to organise themselves productively, but with their own self-determination. So I'm a very pure form of anarchist in that sense. The other thing about anarchism is that there are 20 different flavours on Wikipedia alone. That's quite some brand leverage there for your anarchists, I think. There could be something in this little white A in the inner circle. I really, labels aren't helpful, logos, all of that stuff, because they give the wrong impression, and you can use that to manipulate people, or you can use it to try and get ideas across honestly. But the history is a bit darker than that, really. So that's really where all this is coming from me. And I must say, it's really, really interesting, and the getting into the deeper philosophy of physics. And there is a spiritual aspect to physics. I mean, I've read Brief History of Time, the Stephen Hawking book, and when he says, "I've seen the mind of God" idea, what it does is renewable energy is something I was interested in. Pollution, indigenous peoples, land clearances, the Potato Famine, those sorts of things. The seedy side of the free market doesn't exist. I've said for years, even when I was at the height of my entrepreneurial business, sort of wandering around with my brand on my chest, sort of thing. I felt the city was rigged, and I felt that no market is that volatile. I still believe it now. It's all part of the Andy Warhol famous for 15 minutes thing. It is absolutely ridiculous to have things jumping up and down like that. The only place where odds go up and down like that is in a casino, and it is a casino. And they're turning the world economy into a casino. And the golden rule of casinos is they're monopolistic. You turn off the lights, you don't have any clocks, so you disorient people, and the house always wins, because the odds are stacked in favour of the house. And the owner of the casino is the international banks. And, what we need for sustainability is more local banks, and banking performs an important function, as does being a doctor, as does being a physic healer. Really, I mean, all systems have a natural balance point, but it seems to me that this artificial system that we have favours a sort of global banking system, with the table very much tilted so that its equilibrium is anything but natural. Because I happen to believe that most systems have several balance points, not just one. And when you start looking at sort of chemical, electronic, nuclear type systems, and it's all about systems and ecosystems, that uh, the large grows out of the little, not the other way round. And that's really it. I mean, this is as far as I'm up to with my thinking on this, and I'm just keen to kind of share, what other people have done a lot of work on, that seem to make things a lot clearer. And it's the knowing that things are uncertain. That's at a nuclear, at a subatomic, let's say, at a subatomic level, things are uncertain. Uncertainty is everywhere, but usually everything's okay. Sometimes bad things happen, but the point is that can't be controlled. It can't be controlled if you want to live a life, and that's the point. And the degree of control that for the imperfect system we've got is such that it is stopping us from living a life that can give us happiness and a feeling of contentment. That's my opinion. And what I'm saying is there should be a debate, and we should adopt another imperfect system, which is likely to be less imperfect than the one we've got. That's it at its simplest. Could do better. C- at the moment, and as a society, at local levels and all the rest of it, we all have the potential to turn that C- into an A+. And I really do believe that. And honest scholarly teaching and what have you will allow us to do that. And actually paying and honouring the environment is the way to do it. That's my view. And not using the environment as an excuse to just invent some other taxes. That's what this is all about. And I don't care what anyone says. That is performance art. That is just great. It really is just an amazing. It's an amazing analogy. It's analogous to what happens in life. That there you have it. There is probability, unpredictability. There you have it. That is the universe as it unfolds. The only thing is, it's not in all the different dimensions. It's nice to sort of it's the equivalent of smelling the subatonic roses, really. You could put it that way. But as I say, I mean, it's really. This is the stuff that I want to inform my music now, because the thing I like doing more than anything else is playing my guitar and singing a tune and having a jam with a friend. A good old sing-song, and a nice party. I enjoyed doing sort of logging and stuff like that, back in England, and hope to do some more sort of renewable energy stuff and some physical work, because I, carry a few pounds and stuff, and I'd rather do a bit of physical work than, put my Nike thing on and go down the gym or something. Some people love the gym. Great place to pull. So, meet young ladies and stuff as well, or young men. It's a question really of balance, isn't it? And finding your own balance, because we all have our own balance, and we all, we all have stuff that interests us and doesn't interest us. I don't know many people who have an interest in small print. I certainly don't. But it's so true. The devil's in the detail. There are lots of these little sayings, and So what I'm doing here is actually reading some small print in stuff I find interesting, and this stuff is incredibly interesting for me because I'm interested in digital signal processing with respect to digital modelling of things like guitar amplifiers and and actual guitars themselves, guitar signals, and that before I got really into all of this, because as I say, because of the row I've been having with my bankers in England. Unfortunately, I have more than one, and I do know I know a lot of bankers and a lot of people in banking, and they're all jolly nice people. I mean, it's that, again, the thing about digging a hole. It's a good idea. Once if you find yourself digging a hole, the best thing you can do is stop, climb out. That's if you don't want to be in a hole, or the hole's in the wrong place, or whatever. But we are digging ourselves a bloody great big hole here, and there seem to be elements that seem to think, well, that's okay because if this party ends, I can't really see myself find a replacement for that. Well, being extremely wealthy made me very unhappy. Well, it wasn't, but it's not. It's how we fit into our environment, and it's summed up by the definition of success is getting what you want. So getting what you want is success. But the definition of happiness is wanting what you get. And these aphorisms, we're all encouraged to simplify things, and some things are amazing, and the best thing to do with some of these amazing things is to simplify the level of enjoyment that you have of them. Simplify the expression of the awe. That's because I'm sure in my lifetime there are some things that we don't even know about. Stuff that isn't invented yet. I mean, the idea of stuff that isn't invented yet is quite a fun place to go as well, really. It's Donald Rumsfeld's Known Unknowns, that one. But I'm going to shut up now because I go on forever. And to me, the internet, and being in Sweden, I live in the middle of nowhere in Sweden, and I like close to nature and all this sort of thing, but I do miss having a pint in the local pub and just having a chat about different stuff, and this sort of stuff I'm open to sort of discussions of it, but thinking out loud and making mistakes, not understanding things, learning about things, not forcing the pace of stuff, are all things that can make you happy, and the things that don't make you happy are unnatural deadlines, really. Because there are some things that just don't, that really don't just matter. I mean, like I've been selling some stuff in England recently, and there are all sorts of forms you have to fill out for the government, and then they don't make sense. The commitment. the commitment that the government has to policy, it seems to me, is purely driven by the correlation to how easy it is to tax and what the tax take will be, and then how monitorable that is. Which is a shame, because some of the things that they should be aiming for on our behalf are actually quite difficult to measure. Certainly not things you can trade on the stock market, sort of, millions of times every day. This idea of the spirit level, and this book, the Spirit Level by Wilson and it's called Wilson and Pickett. I have got open on my computer at the moment. I just started reading various academic papers about how you can, you can measure it, or you can approximate it, or whatever. But those are all important things that can't be monetized. I mean, that's where the fuck did that word come from? Monetize. And the monetize button on websites, just there nowadays. And for people to be able to, express the value of their output to other people, that's great. And as a store of value, that's also great. But the use of money for that purpose, as opposed to using it as just another ruse to raise some taxes, just doesn't appeal to me, really. As I say, I keep going. I'm beginning to, I've probably been pretty incoherent all along, but I'm, as I say, this is interesting stuff at the moment, and hopefully I'm going to get back some music, because I haven't played my guitar for a day or two. But anyway, that's great stuff. If this is recorded and whatever, I hope it's been of some mild interest and what have you. But as I say, that's what this diagram was all about.